So are you ready to dive into a world of like devilish pacts and unsettling encounters? And oh yeah, mysterious illnesses too, all happening like against the backdrop of a really rapidly changing Latin America.
And what better place to explore these themes than through, the fantastic? It's a genre which is really known for blurring the lines between reality and imagination.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, that feeling you get when you walk into one of those funhouse mirror rooms?
Hmm.
Everything's like familiar, but then it's also distorted just enough to make you like, what is real? And in this case, the funhouse mirror is reflecting those anxieties about modernization in Latin America, like during the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
And I mean, these anxieties, they weren't just like abstract worries. These were times of just huge societal transformation, industrialization, urbanization, political upheaval.
Hmm.
It was all kind of swirling together, creating this sense of unease, like that the world as they knew it was shifting under their feet.
Yeah, and that's where this anthology comes in, right? This isn't just some, random collection of spooky stories. This is curated. This is a celebration of a decade of LibrosEnRed.
Oh, yeah. LibrosEnRed.
They're an online publishing house, and they're dedicated to making literature accessible to wider audience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so fascinating to see how they're like honoring the power of storytelling,
Yeah.
especially with stories that, they really delve into those timeless questions about change, about identity, about, what it even means to be human.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, even in the digital age, these stories, they still have the power, to captivate us, to challenge us. But, okay, enough about the platform itself. Let's talk about the stories. We're dealing with some heavy hitters.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
These are authors whose words have echoed through, like, generations of readers.
Yeah, we're talking about 7 authors, each one, offering us a unique perspective on this period, this time of intense transformation in Latin America.
It's like we're going on a road trip, a literary road trip, I mean,
Yeah.
through time, across borders. And each stop is going to, reveal a new facet of the fantastic.
And our first stop takes us all the way back to 14th century Spain
Yeah.
with Don Juan Manuel.
Medieval Spain. Talk about a blast from the past.
Right. So his stories, they're called exempla, and they were basically designed to, teach moral lessons
Yeah.
through these engaging narratives. So picture this. A dean, a sorcerer, and this flock of like very patient partridges.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the characters in his tale, Cuento y Seven. It's a story that might be set in medieval times, but it still speaks to something, about human nature. That tendency we all have to be tempted by the promise of easy solutions.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, if it sounds too good to be true. Okay, so we've traveled back in time from medieval Spain. Who is next on our Latin American literary adventure?
Well, next up, we're going to 19th century Peru with Ricardo Palma.
Okay.
He was a master of satire and social commentary, but he disguised it all as these really witty tales.
I like him already.
Right. He was known for his tradiciones.
Yeah.
It's this really unique blend of history and fiction that would often, poke fun at societal norms, make fun of authority figures.
Okay, so a bit of fact, a bit of fiction, and a whole lot of social critique. That sounds like my kind of history lesson.
Right. One of his tradiciones that's actually featured in this anthology, Donde como el diablo perdió el poncho. That's a perfect example of his style. So
Yeah.
picture this. The devil himself just strutting through the streets of Isca, Peru, and he accidentally causes, utter chaos.
Hold on, the devil loses his poncho in Peru. That's hilarious. But I'm guessing there's like a deeper meaning here behind all the comedic chaos.
Oh, absolutely. Palma uses, the devil's misadventures to critique what he saw as hypocrisy and corruption in Peruvian society, especially when it came to facing modernization. It's social commentary, but it's disguised as this devilishly funny tale.
I love how these fantastic stories, they're like Trojan horses. They're sneaking in these really sharp observations about society under the guise of, fantasy. Okay, who's next on our literary journey?
From sunny Peru, we're going to travel to the romantic landscapes of Venezuela with Eduardo Blanco. He was a novelist, a historian, and he brought this really keen eye for detail, this love of mystery to all his writing.
And his writing style, how does that fit into this collection of fantastic tales?
Well, his story in the anthology is called El Número 111. And it's this, haunting blend of romance and the supernatural. But it's also a warning about the dangers of curiosity.
Yeah.
Imagine a young man. He's consumed by this desire, this need to know what people are really thinking, and he's willing to risk everything for this forbidden knowledge.
It's like the Faust legend, this like insatiable thirst for knowledge, but it comes at a terrible price. Okay, I'm hooked. Give me our next author.
Okay, next we're venturing into the heart of Mexico with Manuel José Ozon. And he was a master of Espanto, which basically translates to terror or dread.
Okay, so we're going full gothic horror now. I am so ready for chills.
He was amazing at weaving local folklore and Gothic elements together. He created these really chilling tales that explored, the darker side, the hidden recesses of the human psyche. And his story in the anthology, it's called Encuentro Pavoroso. That means dreadful encounter. It's a perfect example of his ability to unsettle the reader, to provoke them.
Just the title alone, I can tell this isn't your typical ghost story.
You're right. So imagine this, a lone traveler making his way through the Mexican countryside at night. It's desolate. And then he encounters a figure. This figure is so grotesque, so vivid, so otherworldly that it challenges his understanding of what's real.
Okay, that image alone is giving me goosebumps, but I bet this encounter is about way more than just, a creepy figure in the night. It's tapping into those anxieties that we've been talking about, right?
Exactly. The setting, the traveler's isolation, the encounter, they all work together to create this sense of unease, this feeling that something is wrong in the world. And, in the context of a rapidly modernizing Mexico, this dreadful encounter, it takes on a whole new layer of meaning.
Yeah, it's like Othan is saying, hey, we might embrace all this progress, but there's still primal fears, right? These unsettling unknowns that linger in the shadows. This is why I love these deep dives. We're only 4 authors in, and I'm already seeing connections. Who's up next?
Okay, so from the chilling tales of Mexico, let's travel south to Nicaragua to explore the works of Rubén Darío. Now, he was a giant of Latin American literature and a leading figure of the Modernismo movement.
And for those of us who need a little refresher, what was Modernismo all about? What were these artists, these writers reacting to?
Okay, so picture this. It's the turn of the 20th century, and you've got this group of artists, writers, and they're rebelling against the traditions of the past. They want new forms of expression, new ways of seeing the world. That was Modernismo in a nutshell.
I like it.
And Darío, he was at the forefront of this movement with his innovative use of language, his exploration of these, really complex themes like time and memory and identity.
Okay, so how does his story in this anthology, El Caso de la Señorita Amelia, how does that reflect these modernist ideas?
So imagine you return home after years of being away, and you find your childhood friend. But they're frozen in time. Their physical appearance hasn't changed. That's the premise of Darío's El Caso de la Señorita Amelia. It's a story that uses the fantastic to really make us question how time shapes us, how our memories can be unreliable, and how ultimately the past can haunt us, define us even.
Wow, okay. A childhood friend, frozen in time. That's fascinating and unsettling. I feel like I'm picking up on some, anxieties about change, about time passing at play here. Tell me more about this Modernismo movement. What else was going on?
Well, Modernismo was all about breaking free from the old ways of thinking, embracing innovation, experimentation, and Darío's story with its, exploration of nonlinear time, of the subjective nature of reality, it embodies this spirit of pushing those boundaries.
It's like he's saying, hey, the world's a more fluid place than you think, more complex. Okay, so we've traveled from medieval Spain to modern-day Nicaragua. And along the way, we've experienced the chills, the laughter, even mind-bending encounters. Who are our final 2 authors?
Our second-to-last stop takes us to Argentina, home of Leopoldo Lugones. He was famous for writing a ton, and he was fascinated with both the fantastic and the macabre.
2 of my favorite genres.
Right. And he blends them masterfully in his story, Yeezer, which is this haunting tale that explores, the nature of language, the ethics of scientific ambition, and that blurry line between humanity and animality. So imagine this, a scientist. He's so driven by this pursuit of knowledge that he decides to teach his pet chimpanzee, Yeezer, how to speak.
It's like that age-old question, what makes us different from animals? What happens when those boundaries get blurred?
Right. And in the case of Yeezer, those blurred boundaries, they lead to both, profound insights and devastating consequences.
I get this feeling this anthology isn't shying away from the big questions. Okay, so we've arrived at our final destination. Who is our last author on this literary road trip?
Our last stop takes us to Uruguay, the birthplace of Horacio Quiroga.
Okay.
He was a master of the macabre, and his stories often explore, the darker aspects of human nature, the fragility of life. You might know him from his, pretty chilling tale, El Almohadón de Plumas. In English, That's the feather pillow.
Wait a minute, the feather pillow. I think I read that back in college. It's about a young bride who gets sick, right?
Yeah, that's the one. El Almohadón de Plumas is in this anthology, and it's a great example of Quiroga's style. It's a slow burn. It really stays with you. It starts off with that, classic Gothic trope, the sickly bride in a big creepy house. But then it takes this unexpected turn.
Okay, you're killing me. What's the unexpected turn?
Let's just say it involves this monstrous blood-sucking parasite and a feather pillow that represents both, domesticity and this hidden horror.
Oh, right, of course. The blood-sucking parasite. Classic Quiroga. He always gets under your skin, literally and figuratively. But, there's always more to it than just the gore, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a horror story, but it also gets at these anxieties about those unseen forces, the ones that can really threaten our well-being, whether it's, a literal parasite or the psychological toll of a bad marriage or...
So it's about vulnerability, fear of the unknown, those things that can drain us physically and emotionally.
And the way he describes it, the parasite, so clinical, so cold, it makes it even more unsettling.
It's like he's saying, hey, even with all our fancy science, there are still some fears we just can't escape. Okay, so to recap, we've got Spanish Exempla, Peruvian Tradiciones, Venezuelan Gothic Romance, Mexican Espanto, Nicaraguan Musings on Time, Argentinian Explorations of Language, and Uruguayan, Macabre. What a lineup. What ties all these stories together? What are the common threads?
Well, that's what we're going to dive into in part 2 of our deep dive.
All right, so we've met our authors, right? 7 of them, and they come from different centuries, different countries.
And they're all using the fantastic to deal with these, anxieties about change, about identity, about what it even means to be human.
Exactly. But it's not just about what they're saying, right? It's how they're saying it. How are these authors using, the fantastic to explore these anxieties and to do it in such a, visceral way?
That's what makes it so interesting. One of the biggest themes that emerges is this idea of the devil's pact. That classic motif of making a deal with the devil, but then there are always consequences, unexpected, unsettling consequences.
It's the ultimate cautionary tale. You're lured in by the promise of easy solutions, of power, of knowledge, but there's always a hidden cost.
Totally. And you see this so clearly in Donde y Como el Diablo Perdió el Poncho by Ricardo Palma. Just the devil being in Ica, it throws everything off. People start acting crazy, giving into temptation, revealing these raw instincts.
It's like Palma's holding up this funhouse mirror to Peruvian society, and he's exaggerating all those flaws, those hypocrisies that are bubbling under the surface.
And by using the devil, he's tapping into this primal fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of those forces that can just disrupt everything.
And it's not just external forces, right? Eduardo Blanco's story, El Número 111, that gets at the internal struggle. It's about that desire for forbidden knowledge and how that can be our downfall.
Definitely. The main character, he's so desperate to know people's true thoughts, to see through all the, social masks. It's dangerous. He thinks he's going to find enlightenment, but it's really disillusionment, despair even.
It's like they say, be careful what you wish for. They're so different, these stories, in terms of their tone, their style, but they both tap into that anxiety about power, right? Whether it's the devil's influence or that pull of forbidden knowledge.
And those anxieties, they feel super relevant today, don't they? When societies are constantly dealing with change, with uncertainty.
Absolutely. So, okay, so we have the devil's pact, we have temptation, we have consequences. What other anxieties are these authors exploring?
Another one is the unsettling encounter. Those moments where the characters experience something strange, something they can't explain, something that makes them question what's real.
And these aren't just your typical ghost stories, are they? It's deeper than that. It's that feeling that something is off, even if you don't know what it is.
Exactly. Like in Manuel Jose Othon's story, Encuentro Pavoroso.
Yeah.
You have the solitary traveler, that desolate landscape, the grotesque figure. It all adds up to this feeling of dread, like the world is a much darker, scarier place than we want to admit.
And I bet that feeling, that sense of unease, that was pretty common back then. With all the changes happening in Latin America, it's like those unsettling encounters in the stories. They're metaphors for the anxieties of a whole era.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of unsettling encounters, Rubén Dario's El Caso de la Señorita Amelia, it's not horror, but it still gets under your skin. It makes you think about time, about identity, and how we never really know who we are.
Right, this is the one with the childhood friend, right? Frozen in time.
That's the one. So the narrator, he goes back home after being away for years, and he finds Amelia, his friend. And she hasn't aged. Physically, she's the same. It's a story about how time changes us, how our memories can't be trusted, and how the past never really leaves us.
It's like he's using the fantastic to explore these huge existential questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? What does it even mean to be alive in a world that won't stay the same?
Those themes, time, memory, identity, that's classic modernism right there. It's fascinating how all these different anxieties, they pop up in these wildly different stories.
Right. It's all connected. Okay, so we have pacts with the devil, unsettling encounters. What else? What's our third theme?
How about science and its discontents?
Ah, yes. The double-edged sword of progress. That feeling that for every step forward, there's a potential for disaster.
Leopoldo Lugones really digs into that with Uzor. The scientist's goal, his whole ambition, is to bridge the gap between humans and animals. He wants to understand language, to unlock its secrets. But it's also about hubris,
Yeah.
about how our reach exceeds our grasp.
And this anxiety about science, that wasn't just like a science fiction thing back then, was it? Science was moving so fast, changing so much. There were bound to be anxieties about what it all meant, about where it was all going.
Exactly. And then there's Horacio Quiroga's El Almajón de Plumas. On the surface, it's just a creepy story about a woman who gets sick. There's a parasite. It's pretty gruesome.
But this is Quiroga we're talking about. I'm sure it's not that simple.
You know it. It's about more than just a parasite, right? Think about it. This tiny creature that's almost invisible. It becomes this symbol for the things that can destroy us. Slowly, secretly, both physically and mentally.
Like disease, contagion, those were huge anxieties back then.
Right. But it's also about that feeling of helplessness, of being powerless against things we can't control.
It's brilliant and unsettling all at the same time.
Exactly. That juxtaposition he uses, the clinical descriptions of the parasite alongside the bride's decline, it creates this sense of inevitability, like something awful is going to happen and there's nothing anyone can do about it.
Okay, so we've got pacts with the devil, unsettling encounters, and now the dark side of scientific progress. We're covering some heady stuff. But these aren't just Latin American anxieties, are they? These themes are universal.
That's what makes literature so powerful, right? It goes beyond time, beyond place. It gets at those core questions. Who are we? What scares us? What does it even mean to be human? Especially in a world that feels so unpredictable, you know?
So we've talked about the themes of these stories, right? But now for the big question. Why should we care? What makes these stories relevant to someone listening right now? That's the question, right? Why should we care about these stories? These writers, they were writing in a different time, a different world.
True, but the thing about these stories, these pacts, these unsettling encounters, they get at something really true about human nature.
Like all those anxieties about modern life, about the unknown, those questions about who we are, what it all means, they might look different now, but they're still there.
Think about it. The Devil's Pact. That's basically every compromise we make, every shortcut we take. We do it all the time. Maybe we sacrifice our health. Maybe it's our relationships. We tell ourselves it's worth it, you know?
Yeah.
That desire for a quick fix, it never really goes away.
And those unsettling encounters, those moments when everything feels off, when the world just feels wrong.
Yeah.
That's got to be more common now than ever, right? With technology and politics and the climate.
Exactly. It's like we don't belong anywhere anymore, even in our own homes, our own lives.
It's like that feeling, you're a stranger in a strange land, only the land is your own life.
And then there's that anxiety about science, about progress. Yeah, we have all this incredible technology, but then we have to deal with the consequences, right? The ethical questions.
It's like we're living in a world made of our best and worst impulses, our dreams, our fears. It's both progress and peril.
And that's why these stories work, why they still matter. They show us ourselves, you know? Those fears, they might be universal, but the way they play out, that's what keeps us coming back.
So when you're reading this anthology, don't just think about the fantastical stuff. Pay attention to how these writers use those elements, you know, the devils, the creepy encounters, because they're talking about something real, and it's something that we're still dealing with today.
And here's something to think about. This anthology, it's celebrating LibrosEnRed, right? This platform, they're bringing literature to people in the digital age.
Right.
And today, the things we worry about, it's globalization, technology, the environment. What would these writers say now? How would they use the fantastic to tell those stories?
Now that's a question worth asking.
It is.
So to everyone listening, as you dig into this anthology, let those questions guide you. What resonates with you? What speaks to your own experiences, your own anxieties?
That's what's so great about literature,
Yeah.
right? It's not passive. It's about engaging, about thinking critically.
Well said. All right, everyone, dive into this anthology. Let your imagination run wild. See what you find. And if you're feeling social, share your thoughts online using the hashtag DeepDiveLatinLit. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep exploring.